Welcome, truthers and truth-curious mainstreamers. This is Poe's Law with me, Charlatan Poe. Okay, I want to just start with a little bit of housekeeping. Talked to a lawyer who is not a fan of the show, and he said to not burn your money. Apparently, the nanochips that are embedded in the actual bills will immediately tell Treasury agents who monitor that kind of thing where you are and who you are. So it's kind of a futile gesture because they'll just make more bills, and by burning it, we're not really doing. It's more of a symbolic act, and it's kind of an empty one. But I guess the consequences for us will be greater than our impact against the ones we're fighting. So don't burn your money, but do switch over to crypto for anything that you can't pay cash for, and if you're paying cash, still use. Let's just focus on the $2 bill. So leave the rest of them alone. We'll just stop using them except for the $2 bills, and then we're going to use crypto for everything else. And I think that's going to be the best way to start to free ourselves from this conspiracy of control out there. So that's all that on that front. Main reason I'm out here today is I left the house yesterday and I went for a walk, and during the walk there was I came across, just laying right in the sidewalk, folded neatly, just up like this. It's Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Profit Corporation Annual Report, and it's for 2019. So it's like this official document, but it's obviously just been out there for a while, and somehow it ended up right on the sidewalk directly in my path that I was crossing. So I remembered nothing happens by accident. This is an oddly official communication to just be litter, especially since it's still like folded up. So I took it home and read it and started looking through it and trying to figure out what the message was. So I think this actually is going to relate to the time drops. We'll see. I'm going to lay out what I think, and then you can all let me know. So the ID number on that communication added up to 35, which then combine those, you get number 8. So keep that in the back of your mind. Got number 8 as the signifier by which to read everything else. Okay, and then at the bottom we've got this form, or the what does it say? This report is required by, and then we have section 911, just significant on its own. But then 911 adds to 11, which adds to 2. Then it's from Act 284, which adds to 14, which adds down to 5. Put that 5, we're going to come back to that in just a second. And it's from the Public Acts of 1972, which adds to 10, 1, and 0. So we've got that. And then the form itself was due to be submitted May 15, 2019. So again, kind of odd. This much time later, it would appear in a little weathered, but not in the condition you would expect to have it disintegrated over several winters. 3, which adds down to 5, so we've got another 5. Okay, so we've got a 2 and a 5 from the section in the act, which adds up to 7, so that lets me know this is relevant to the Demon Dog Cabal. The 2 5s there, so we have a 2 and then 2 5s. We had a lot of 5 significance in the second time drop, so that's the one I'm going to focus on there. Which is interesting that it also references the Demon Dog Cabal. Alright, before I get into number 8, no, I'll just do that. So number 8 is significant. It's obviously right next to 7, so it's on the same plane, but it's in an opposite alignment, and it contains, 7 significant of like destruction and disaster. It's the most dangerous and worst outcome in all the different elements. And 8 has echoes of that, but it has solved the inherent flaw, or the initial error which led to that destruction. So it's still not good, but it's progressing toward a solution. So I guess in the context of having a 7 and an 8, we're talking about movement of progress. There's a plan in action. It's happening both in the physical realm as well as the digital realm. And then the other thing that I noticed, it was almost at the exact same spot that I got that form. There was just like unspooled magnetic tape from a cassette, just all tangled up in the weeds along the sidewalk. And that tape, that spring brake tape in the time drop box, I think is one of the, there aren't that many tapes left in the world, I don't think, or at least not to just show up as litter. I don't remember the last time that I encountered some part of a cassette tape as just random litter. They're pretty concentrated to like thrift shops or collectible circumstances, flea markets, that kind of thing. So clearly, this thing is also meant to be a warning. So I don't think that this is from anonymous source G. Gordon Liddy. I think it's from some other agent, and it was meant for me in reference to what I'm doing here. When I got back home, I definitely, first thing I did was get in the door and check, and the tape was and is still in the time drop box. So that wasn't the guts of that tape. That would have been fucked up. If I leave home to find my house has not only been broken into and I've been stolen from, but the evidence has then been put in my path to find as I'm leaving the house on the rare occasion that I do. So I'm thinking I need to read through time drop number 2 here again. O Lord, the snare, activity will ensure the shipment, support the success, see this guide, Nanaka Akanen, 4 fingers over the red sash, human services, the grass is growing, locate the customer and protect Tuxedo Gallery with the disappearance of the moon, origin student program, let's party beyond the battle, information, interest, penalty estimated, 12/31, 17, 10, 30. Reading that now with this additional information from the annual report filing, it seems to confirm some of the things I was thinking. That it seems to confirm that there's some kind of plan in action around the Lincoln assassination. I think that's like a time-space nexus that this thing is floating around for some reason, at least relative to the position in which I'm receiving these messages. The information interest penalty estimated. This thing is talking about penalty fees as well. It's another financial document, so I'm kind of like making that connection there too. So I think maybe the new, or the most significant new thing that this introduces is that number 8. So the sign of progress. The grass is growing. Things are being changed. 7 to 8 indicates for the better on one level, but it's also, once you get to 10, it's an ending and beginning. You cycle back around. And in each cycle, the exact makeup of what is considered good and bad can change. So I hesitate to say like for the better in the sense of kind of an absolute or cosmic good, but probably for the better, at least from where we're talking about it. It's also some kind of warning that either I need to stop or I need to keep going but faster with seeing that unspooled tape, or that might have just been a warning that my actions are being noticed, and I'm obviously publishing these, but not really, hopefully not revealing too much about where I am. So it is unclear. What might make it a little, before I go any farther, I had a couple of questions. So in the first time drop, 3 was kind of the significant number, which symbolizes like understanding. It's a realization of the potential of the partnership of 2. And then 5, which is significant in the second time drop, indicates that motion has come to the stability of 4. That there's structure and now there's motion. It's ironically, or maybe not, the introduction of time from a kind of certain perspective, which brings on a storm and a period of strife. So numerically, these 2 time drops are making sense to each other. The next thing that happened to me, it was a big day yesterday, or at least getting out of the house for a while kind of kicked my mind into gear. I walked through a park, and there was a big rock or granite piece of monument with a plaque, a metal plaque on it. So it wasn't anything elaborate, but just saying the dedication of the park, which was 1976, so it was a bicentennial dedication of this it's just a little pocket park. I don't know, this trailer park is like in the hinterlands of some suburbs. Like it's a weird transition where even the urban suburban sprawl peters out, and kind of industrial rural starts to take over. And this is kind of just right in between there. So this park is not too much farther back into the suburban zone. So it's just kind of a small little playground park with a field. It's got this rock saying that was dedicated 1976, and then there was a Bible verse on it. 2 Chronicles 7:14. So if you add up 2 from 2 Chronicles 7 and 14, you get 2 plus 7 plus 1 plus 4, which equals 14. 1 plus 4 is 5, so we got another 5. So which is how I knew that that was also something that was connected to the other messages that I have been getting. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit here. The other question before I move on to this next section is, it seems like sometimes I talk about the demon dog cabal as being like a global conspiracy for Earth's energies, but the initial story I told was just about the local dog park here and those dogs harvesting one of the cats' lives to get high on. And I think in looking around, other people have noticed this too, which is what leads me to, I'm definitely not the only one doing this. So I think that it is global, and I don't know for sure if the dog-cat relationship, that kind of harvesting is just the local flavor of this cabal, or if that's more widespread. And I don't know that it's, however widespread that is if this conspiracy is specifically limited to dogs and cats. Because when I say demon dogs from Sirius, I think they're shadow agents from Shadow Sirius. Thinking of them as demon dogs just makes the most sense from what I've seen. But if you've seen other, if you've seen like demon parrots or something where you are, I think it's all connected. All right. Oh, and why would they come here, like with the whole universe to choose from? And I think that they are probably just our encountering of something built into the universe, which is entropy, which is hunger. The universe, for whatever reason, has built into itself its eventual end. So these shadow agents from Shadow Sirius, these demon dogs, I think are just a manifestation of the hunger of the universe. It's the seed of destruction, the human perception of entropy. I got a little deep, but I think that's kind of where I go when I'm trying to make sense of all this. Okay, so 2 Chronicles 7:14. I went and looked that up. Right, so I'm going to read that verse first, and then I think I'm going to read the whole, or the second half of chapter 7 to put that verse in better context. So 2 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 14. If my people who are called by my name humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. I think that's a strange choice for the dedication plaque at a city park. I think it's a strange choice for the bicentennial. That is maybe, if you really stretch it, like some kind of commentary on living in a mixed Nixon's America. Or coming to terms with Nixon and hoping for a better outcome, and so I think like getting together and making a public park that's still around more than half a century later, or I guess maybe less than half a century, decades later. Probably a good way to channel your feelings, so I'm not questioning that, but it's still strange, that's why I think that this message was meant for me in this context, and it's been waiting to be read for its time, kind of low key, this whole time. Alright, so starting at verse 12 and going through verse 22, it looks like, of chapter 7, 2nd Chronicles. This is a New Revised Standard Version, which I like for the level of scholarship that went into it. It gives a lot of interesting historical reveals. So this is kind of I guess post facto subtitled God's Second Appearance to Solomon. Then the Lord appeared to Solomon in the night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command the locust to devour the land, or send pestilence among my people, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayer that is made in this place. For now I have chosen and consecrated this house so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked, doing according to all that I have commanded you and keeping my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish your royal throne as I made covenant with your father David, saying, you shall never lack a successor to rule over Israel. But if you, and here there's a note, this word you is meant plural. So if you, plural, turn aside and forsake my statutes and my commandments that I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will pluck you. This you has a note from the Hebrew. It can also be translated, or maybe better translated as them. Then I will pluck you, them, up from the land that I have given you, them, and this house, which I have consecrated for my name, I will cast out of my sight, and will make it a proverb and a byword among all peoples. And regarding this house, now exalted, everyone passing by will be astonished and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this house? And then they will say, because they abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they adopted other gods, and worshipped them, and served them before. Therefore he has brought all this calamity upon them. So after reading all that verse 14 is even weirder to put on a public park, I gotta say. But how can we read this in the context of these demon dogs? Well, it seems as if the Lord is talking to Solomon, so the son of David, Solomon the wise, who is ruling over a kingdom of Israel. So a kingdom that has international relations in the ancient world. This is not just a moving tribe without any neighbors, if such a thing ever happened in human history. This is definitely a kingdom with power and being concerned about geopolitics. And God has, or the Lord has heard Solomon's prayer and has selected a place, I think it's going to be selected a place for the Temple of Solomon is probably, I think, where this is going. Yeah, so this is, because the first part, he's talking about the temple. So this is choosing the site for the Temple of Solomon so that there's an anchor in time, space-time to connect the Israelites and the Lord. Now, there's also some prescriptives here. So the Lord is saying, when there's no rain or there's a plague of locusts or there's pestilence, disease, now you have a place to go. You have a place to turn to take refuge, to deliver your prayers, and they will be more effective. I will hear them. I will make a dedicated channel from that temple to my interventions. And saying that you need to keep traditions. You need to keep the ways of your father, the Lord of your ancestors, who brought you out of bondage in Egypt. So I don't know necessarily what this means in regard to these time drops and the demon dogs. I haven't really had time to digest that connection yet. But there is something interesting here, at least like a tenuous connection of worship, perhaps. Worship and harvest. There's also the intervention connection that we discovered going through time drop number 2. There's a reference to death and resurrection, and that what happens between is some kind of intervention, a divine intervention or an intervention through time. Now this bit at the end here about worshiping other gods is interesting. So this is from a long time ago when I took I don't remember what class it was, but a couple of old school scholars, Morton Smith and Cyrus Gordon. I don't remember if one or the other, my professor kind of recommended based on some things I had been saying, or it was just one of those like finding something on the shelf at the library and then there's a book next to it that, oh, that maybe looks good too. But the same way suggestions work when you're watching something or buying something online. So I found these two guys, and Morton Smith has kind of an interesting idea that the ancient Hebrews. These electronic malfunctions. Gotta get on here and talk about them because they are multiplying. So Martin Smith has this idea about the ancient Hebrews. There may have been two competing sects one viewing Yahweh as a chief among several deities, and in a sect that was like a Yahweh alone, that there are no other gods, or all other gods are just false imaginings or something like that. I'm not an expert on this guy. I just remember like what caught my interest and got my imagination working. I think the best scholarship on the Bible is the multiple author hypothesis that has gone through and analyzed and found different parts attributed to different authors, and authors is just a kind of a rough way to have like a group or a time period during which certain pieces evolved that were then way after the fact edited together and kind of put in a certain order. But the order we read the Bible in, these different passages were written hundreds, thousands of years apart. Some of it's probably like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 more oral tradition that came down and was eventually just set down. So the story that we perceive when we read this is a construction from a certain group of people or groups of people over a certain time period that then we have inherited, and it's kind of become canon, it's become codified. I've always wanted to see a Bible published where the scholarship just like takes it apart and then puts the pieces in our best estimate of the chronology of authorship and read it kind of as something that developed over time, whatever I guess we have left of that time period. So this idea that there were these different sects and reading these passages, I was just reading Václav Havel's Power of the Powerless. And he's talking about the system of laws and how if somebody were to just read our laws without knowing anything about our society, it would be perceived, the conclusions drawn would be very different and idealized from the actual conditions of our society. And you can extrapolate that actually to like if all human beings were to just go right now and the aliens that are visiting us were to come and just look through all of our kind of static, dead content that was no longer existing in like a living matrix of culture, where it was just like there's no one to speak for it. Anything that's not written down or said or talked about or recorded doesn't exist. So imagine that you have to take yourself a step back and pick up anything and then try to go through your mind on everything that you're taking for granted in order for the thing that you're watching, reading, listening to even exist, that somebody else would never know and would have no way of knowing. It's not anything that can be deduced from observation. And that's, interestingly, the way we interact with a lot of the past. We only have what has been written down. So if you read some of these passages, like the Second Chronicles chapter 7 stuff, where because they abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they adopted other gods and worshipped them and served them. Therefore he has brought all this calamity upon them. So if you read that from an idea of maybe this was written during the height of the Babylonian Empire and by Hebrew scholars in captivity in Babylon, we're trying to figure out a reason why everything's gone so wrong, and saying that there's this like trying to find in the past or kind of give strength to people now by referencing this tribal god in the past who used to be real big time, and it's not his fault, our fault, because now we're being promiscuous and flirting with the local deities here, and then further complicate it by within that idea there being a group that's like, oh, yeah, these other deities are real, but Yahweh is the big time, and we need to get him back to chief, and a competing group who wants to establish Yahweh as only God ever. Everything else is merely a false idol. There's only one God. You know, and you can maybe think of these as like the left or the right is Yahweh only, and like Yahweh chief being the left or the right and left conservatives and liberals of an ancient Hebrew society in exile. Right? It kind of starts to really get your mind going for how these things change over time. Now the Cyrus Gordon is more of like just an ancient history scholar. The thing he adds to this that's fascinating. I might be getting a little bit of these guys confused, so just let me know if I did, and I'll try to clarify later on. So he is the one that kind of got me to thinking about geopolitics, and that humans have always had competition for resources and land, and the reason you can read Shakespeare and find identification there, and you can read the Epic of Gilgamesh and find identification there, is there are just certain things about being human that are kind of timeless. So, and some of those things are kind of shitty. They like are just our kind of like primate mammal instinct for tribe and territory. Cyrus Gordon is bringing in these ideas of the ancient world being a lot more connected than we give it credit for. So there's this section, and I don't know if it's in Chronicles or what book it's in, but talking about King David having this elite force of mercenaries, and then Gordon suggests that those are actually Greek mercenaries, and going like a lot of there are events recorded in the Bible that if you put it on the timeline corresponds to ancient Greece. So we think of compartmentalize it, they happen in silos. Ancient Greek philosophy over here versus maybe the Bible over here, but really these events were happening at the same time. The peoples experiencing these things in real time knew about each other and interacted. It was completely possible to travel from ancient Israel to ancient Greece and vice versa, and probably did. And here are these kind of biblical documentations or suggestions of ancient Greeks in Israel. So we have every reason to believe that these ideas would kind of encounter and cross-fertilize with each other. There's also, this is not Gordon, but he might hint at this, but just genetic evidence that we have since then of indicating that the idea of like the ancient Israelites or ancient Hebrews talked about in the Old Testament kind of being like kind of scooped out whole, every last one, and then scattered all over the place, or like them coming out of ancient Egypt into Levant, maybe, or I don't know if that's maybe Turkey. Ancient Israel. My ancient geography is not great. So the idea of those ideas of like definite concrete peoples moving A to B, the genetic evidence kind of suggests not only like a continuous mixing, but what we might have record of is more a kind of some fraction of the population moving A to B. The primary thing that happened was an idea, a religion moving or being spread out. So the Palestinians of today are the local descendants of the ancient Israelites of the Bible, perhaps, and the dominating is too loaded a word for what this context is. The overarching, maybe, like government, political, religion of the area has changed and developed over time. So if we think about, so imagine like a tray, a big cookie sheet if you want, and there are holes drilled maybe, a couple along the sides and then each of the corners that are big enough. And then you fill this tray with marbles, and you start shaking it a little bit, or you set it to like kind of like have a little bit of vibration. So the marbles are kind of staying mostly in place, but they are kind of jostling and moving around, and some of them are falling through these holes, and then maybe you're like adding marbles as this happens slowly, so it stays full. And you think of that as maybe like human beings on Earth, and not only just the succession of generations, births and deaths, but also just kind of movement across the globe, people moving. And now imagine even like some small bowls or water glasses or something kind of turned upside down, and then covering groups of these marbles on the cookie sheet. And occasionally these things kind of lift and then come down again, but they stay, for the most part, on the same places relative to the cookie sheet. The marbles that are contained within them are constantly kind of jostling and moving through. And then maybe these let's call them bowls, maybe these bowls are themselves kind of moving a little bit, but more slowly. And these bowls are belief systems. And these belief systems are occupied by different people over time, and maybe sometimes they tend to just get stuck and follow right along, and then somehow they break apart when the marbles within start to fall through. But maybe sometimes they have a kind of resilience and ability to like bounce and recapture new marbles so that more come in. So there are different kinds of belief systems, but the people, it's not an exact relationship. They exist kind of trans or super personal level. And if that sounds kind of far out, just think about here. Think about the Constitution and all the laws of the land, and how many of them you've actually read, and how when a kid is born and begins to grow up, they don't know the laws written down that govern the land, but are exposed to a code of conduct, behavior, a belief system that everyone is kind of abiding by. And future discussion on whether that's voluntary or involuntary or whatever reason. But the fact is, like, kids grow up pretty naive about why or where it's coming from, but they nonetheless, by the time those questions come up, have been completely acculturated into a belief system, and that really concerns or governs how they live their lives on a day-to-day basis. So, why do I want to bring all this up? I said when I first started making the connection on what that demon dog ritual was, that the blood libel, and since then I want to expand and think about fairy tales or folklore about vampires or werewolves or all the villains, anything, all the things that eat us, that show up in folklore and fairy tale and mythology. And parasitism being the dominant form, and whatever this harvester kind of energy is, this hunger, this entropy thing that we're encountering, however that is manifesting will change just based on the culture that encounters it. And reading that verse, at first it seems like it's kind of a warning, and maybe it is, but it also, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, has a kind of inner lining about how these things are changeable. Keep your eyes open, and nothing is what it seems, and the position you're negotiating with this conspiracy is likely to change, and the appearance of the conspiracy is likely to change as events transpire, as generations go on. So, I guess, going through all that, my final message, I got a pee, so I'm getting kind of antsy. My final message is just, keep your eyes open and stay tuned.